Hey everybody, today we're going to be working on the zero product property, which is going to help us solve quadratic equations. And remember, quadratic equations have an x squared in them, and that's the highest exponent. And quadratics also make that parabola either up or down. So right now we are going to solve for x, and in doing so, we are also finding where the parabola hits the x-axis. So if I have a -2 and a 1, that means our parabola hits our x-axis or crosses the x-axis at -2 and 1. So the first one we're going to solve is 0 equals x squared plus 3x minus 18. Now, if this was a typical equation without the x squared, we would just add the 18 over and then divide by 3 and we'd solve for x. However, it's a little bit more difficult when we have the x squared and we have an x. So we're going to factor. So this is a 1. My -18 goes to the top. On the bottom is a 3. 6 times -3. Now I don't have to make the box because I have 1x squared. I know x times x gets me to x squared. And then I've got plus 6 and minus 3 equals 0. Now, my zero product property tells me that if I am multiplying two things together, which is what we're doing here with our parentheses, if I'm multiplying two things together, one of them has to be 0 in order for us to equal 0, right? Because anything times 0 is 0. So if this is 0, this x plus 6, it doesn't matter what this is. This could be a million, but if I take it times 0, I get 0. Or we could make this equal to 0. Then it doesn't matter if this is like 72. 72 times 0 is still 0. So what we have to do is we want to make x plus 6 0 because it could be 0. We also have to make x minus 3 0. So when I solve for x here, now it's just a typical equation. Subtract 6 from both sides. X equals -6. And we're going to add 3 to both sides. X equals 3. Now, you don't have to plug this in every time, but I'm going to quickly do it to show you that I'm telling you the truth. So if I plug this in, if I plug -6 plus 6 in, we get 0 times -6 minus 3 is -9. That's 0. If I plug in 3, 3 plus 6 is 9. 3 minus 3 is 0. 9 times 0 is 0. I can also check it by plugging it into the top. -6 squared is 36, plus 3 times -6 is -18 minus 18. Well, I know this is -36, so 36 minus 36 is 0. Let's plug in 3. 3 squared gives me 9. 3 times 3 gives me 9 minus 18. Well, 18 minus 18 is 0. So I promise you it works. And if I was to graph this, I would have an x-intercept of -6 and an x-intercept of 3. On our next problem, we have 0 equals 2x squared plus x minus 6. Well, I'm going to factor. 2 times -6 is -12. 1 is on the bottom. Well, 4 times -3. Now I have to make the box because it's 2x squared. So I have 2x squared minus 6 at the end, 4x, and -3. So this, I can pull a 2x out. Oops, I forgot the x. We can pull a -3 out of this one. These only have a 1x in common, and I can factor out 2, and it's positive. So I've got x plus 2 times 2x minus 3. And remember, this was set equal to 0. So when we're looking at the zero product property, x plus 2 equals 0, and 2x minus 3 equals 0. I need to solve for x. So I'm going to subtract 2. So x equals -2. Add 3 to both sides. 2x equals 3. divide by 2, x equals 3 over 2. So I have an x-intercept of 3 over 2, which is 1.5, and x equals -2. All right, the next one. Let's try 0 equals 30x squared minus 27x plus 6. It looks like they are all divisible by 3, so I'm going to pull out a 3. 30 divided by 3 is 10. Negative 27 divided by 3 is -9. 6 divided by 3 is 2. All right, now let's try to factor. 10 times 2 is 20. -9 is on the bottom. We've got -5 times -4. Okay, let's make our box. 10x squared plus 2 at the end. I've got -5x, -4x. These two have a 5x in common. We've got a 2 and it's negative. These have a 2x in common and just a 1 and it's negative. So I've got 2x minus 1 times 5x minus 2 equals 0. Once again, since we're solving for x, I'm going to set both of these equal to 0. 2x minus 1 and 5x minus 2. So I'm going to add 1. 2x equals 1. Divide by 2. X equals 1/2. Add 2. So 5x equals 2. Divide by 5. X equals 2 over 5. So these intercepts are actually quite close to each other. Okay. So now what happens if it's not set equal to 0? So let's pretend I have 5 equals 8x squared minus 6x minus 4. Well, the first thing here, in order to solve for x, as long as we have x squared and x, it has to be set equal to 0. So I need to move this 5 over to the other side. We're just going to go ahead and subtract 5. So we've got 8x squared minus 6x minus 9. Now, one of the questions I'll probably get is, why did you put the -5 all the way by the -4? Well, there's no x or x squared behind it, so I can't put it with an x squared or an x. I have to put it with our plain old number. Okay, now there's nothing over here. Everything's set equal to 0. I can start by factoring. So 8 times -9 is -72. -6 is on the bottom. So we have -12 times 6. Make the box. 8x squared. -9's on the bottom. -12x and 6x. So these have 4x in common. These have a 3. These have a 2x. And then we have a 3 and it's negative. So I've got 2x minus 3 times 4x plus 3 equals 0. So now one of them has to be 0. So 2x minus 3 equals 0. That could be our 0. Or 4x plus 3 could be 0. So I'm going to add 3 to both sides. And then I'm going to divide by 2 to get 3 over 2. Subtract 3. Divide by 4. X is -3/4. So remember, we could always plug these back in to check to see if they work. I've got one more for us. Let's try -10x squared equals -13x minus 30. Now, remember I said they had to be set equal to 0. Neither side is 0, so we need to start moving things. Now, my suggestion, remember how I said we didn't want to have a negative in front of the x squared value? Since we have that, let's move it to the other side, because once I move it to the other side, it's no longer a negative. So there's nothing left. My x squared should go first. So 10x squared minus 13x minus 30. All right, we're going to factor. 10 times negative 30 is negative 300. Negative 13's on the bottom. So when we figure this out, 25 times 12 with a negative 25. I think so. 12 quarters makes $3. All right, so we make our box. 10x squared, negative 30's at the end. We have 12x and negative 25x. So they've got a 2x in common. 5 goes into both of those and it's negative. 10 and 25 both have a 5 and an x. 12 and 30. Well, if I take 30 divided by 5, I get 6. 2 times 6, yep, gets us to 12 and it's positive. So 5x plus 6 times 2x minus 5. They're set equal to 0. Some of you might be getting good at not even having to write these on paper and just knowing what x is. My email's blowing up today. Okay, subtract 6. Divide by 5. X equals negative 6 over 5. If you're really good, once again, you'd add 5, divide by 2, you get 5 over 2. So if you're getting good at not writing this step down, kudos to you. Feel free to skip that step. X is 5 over 2. Just make sure you do it correctly. All right, so that's the lesson on the zero product property. So if you have any questions, once again, let me know, and I will talk to you soon.